Everyone thought she was dead, until she stood at the throne room doors. The night air shimmered with the glow of 1,000 lanterns strung across the palace courtyard. Music swelled through the corridors, the lilting notes of flutes and viols echoing off ancient stone walls polished to perfection for the occasion. Courtiers in silks and satins danced beneath the stars, their laughter floating above the rustle of gowns and the clink of goblets. It was the eve of Princess Elira's 21st birthday, and the entire kingdom of Virelia had turned its eyes to the capital. Tonight, not only would the princess be celebrated, but the king was expected to formally announce her as heir to the throne, a moment long awaited by noble houses and common folk alike. Elira moved through the crowd with practiced grace, her golden gown catching the light like a sunrise. She smiled, not out of obligation, but genuine warmth. She was beloved by all who knew her. The child who had once run barefoot through the palace gardens was now a poised, confident young woman. She stopped to greet merchants, lords, ambassadors, and servants with the same sincerity, her amber eyes radiating kindness. Even the skeptical council members had, over the years, come to admire her sense of justice and quiet strength. To the people, she was more than royalty. She was hope. But hope, as history often warned, was a fragile thing. As the final toast was raised and the fireworks began to bloom in the sky, a deep, unnatural rumble shook the palace. For one terrible second, the revelry froze. Then came the explosion, a violent, blinding burst that tore through the east wing, shattering windows and sending waves of flame and smoke into the night. Screams erupted. The orchestra fell silent. Guards rushed toward the chaos as the crowd scattered like startled birds. When the smoke cleared, the horror set in. The east wing, Princess Elira's private quarters, was in ruins. Bodies were pulled from the wreckage. Ash clung to the skin of those who had tried to save her. But of Elira, there was no sign. No blood, no body. Only a scorched circlet and a shattered pendant that had once hung around her neck. The kingdom plunged into mourning. Black banners were hung from towers. Bells tolled across the provinces. The king, shattered by grief, locked himself away, refusing all counsel. Rumors spread like wildfire. Some whispered that enemy assassins had infiltrated the palace. Others claimed it was an inside job, that someone close to the throne had orchestrated her death. A few believed she had staged her own disappearance. The most superstitious among the peasants spoke of dark omens and cursed bloodlines. Weeks turned into months. Memorials were erected. Poems written. And though the court moved on, crowning a new heir in her absence, the people never forgot the girl with firelight in her eyes, the princess who had vanished into smoke, leaving behind only questions and a silence that echoed through the halls of power. The days following the explosion passed in a haze of sorrow and disbelief. The sun rose over a changed kingdom, its light failing to penetrate the shadow that now lay heavy across Virelia. The people wore black, the markets grew quiet. Children who had once pretended to be knights defending Princess Elira's honor now clutched dolls in silence, their games forgotten. A thick mourning veil covered not just the capital, but the entire realm, as if the land itself was grieving. In the palace, King Aderon was a shell of the man he had once been. His crown sat untouched on its velvet cushion, the throne room silent and cold. He spoke to no one, save for murmured words to the air when he thought he was alone. Servants reported hearing him whisper Elira's name through the night, pleading for her to come back, for the gods to undo what had been done. He refused to eat, and the royal physicians fretted, but no medicine could mend a father's broken heart. Outside the palace walls, however, the machinery of power could not be stilled by grief. The throne could not remain empty forever. With no body to confirm Elira's death, some argued that a royal inquiry should be launched. Others insisted that the kingdom's future must take priority. A power vacuum had formed, and the noble houses wasted no time in exploiting it. At the center of this maelstrom rose Lord Kaelin, Elira's cousin, a handsome, silver-tongued noble with a reputation for diplomacy and strategic brilliance. In hushed meetings and public speeches alike, Kaelin presented himself as the natural successor. He spoke of stability, of legacy, and of honoring Elira's memory by continuing her vision. The council, desperate to avoid further unrest, reluctantly gave their support. Within weeks, Kaelin was crowned regent, a title carefully chosen to imply temporary stewardship, though few doubted his true ambition. Despite the ceremony, the people remained uneasy. Candles continued to burn in windows for Elira's return. Folk songs turned mournful, and prayer circles gathered in secret, clinging to the belief that their princess still lived. There were stories, travelers who claimed to have seen a woman in gold in the borderlands, or soldiers swearing they heard her voice in their dreams. But Kaelin dismissed them all as dangerous distractions. "She is gone," he declared before the court. "We must let her go." And so, under a sky still tinged with smoke, Virilia pressed forward. But something vital had been lost, not just a princess, but a sense of unity, a belief in light amid darkness. In its place, uncertainty grew, and with it, the quiet dread that the kingdom's greatest tragedy had only just begun. She awoke on a bed of rough-hewn blankets, the taste of blood and soot lingering on her tongue. At first, she didn't recognize the damp, low-ceilinged room or the muffled voices drifting through a crack in the wooden door. Pain singed her side, and when she lifted a trembling hand, she saw bandages stained with dark rust. Her memories lay scattered. One moment she was laughing beneath lantern light, the next, a thunderous blast and a flash of flame. The rest was empty space. Footsteps approached, and the door creaked open to reveal 3 figures cloaked in charcoal-gray cloaks. Their faces were hidden beneath hoods, but there was kindness in their careful movements, gentle hands that adjusted her blankets, whispered words she could not yet understand. They did not call her princess or speak of crowns. They called her simply friend. There was no rivalry here, only urgent compassion. One of them, taller than the others, held out a wooden goblet of herbal tea, the steam warm against her cheek. She drank, mind swimming, and felt shards of herself begin to knit back together. They had found her amid the ruin of the East Wing, half buried in rubble. With strength born of desperation, they had hoisted her to safety, fleeing through secret passages and crumbling corridors until the palace was a distant ember on the horizon. 4 days they traveled on horseback, threading through forgotten roads and dense woodlands that even the royal mapmakers had abandoned. The world beyond the gilded halls was harsher than she'd imagined, cold winds, jagged cliffs, and endless forests where wolves howled at the moon. Yet she felt freer here than she had ever felt beneath the palace's gilded ceilings. At first, her mind was a blank slate. She did not know who she was or why they had risked everything for her. Every reflection in a puddle, every shard of memory, brought fragments. Her mother's lullaby, the crest on her brother's shield, her father's sorrowful eyes. As her strength returned, so did her resolve. Questions swelled in her chest. Why had the explosion spared her? Who had planned it? And most terrifying of all, who among those she once trusted had conspired to see her dead? With each secret they shared, each whispered rumor pieced together, Elira realized that her disappearance was no accident but a deliberate act of betrayal. And as the final strands of her memory snapped into place, she vowed to uncover the truth and reclaim everything that had been stolen from her. The palace had been a world of marble and velvet, where hunger was a distant rumor and danger existed only in bedtime tales. But beyond its walls, Elira discovered a kingdom that bled beneath a polished surface. She moved through villages cloaked in fog and silence, where farmers bent under the weight of unjust taxes and children scavenged for bread crusts while nobles feasted in distant halls. Soldiers patrolled roads not as protectors, but as enforcers of Kaelin's growing rule, their eyes cold, their swords quick. Elira watched in stunned silence, guilt gnawing at her. How had she never seen this before? In the beginning, she was clumsy in this new life, her hands blistered from helping with harvests, her sleep broken by nightmares and pain. But her companions, the outcasts who had saved her, taught her patience. They showed her how to wield a blade, read a map, ride without ceremony. She studied law and history from tattered books, questioned the principles she once accepted without doubt. Through sweat and bruises, she grew sharper, stronger. Not the sheltered girl who had once smiled at royal galas, but a woman forged by truth and fire. She was no longer just Elira the lost. She was Elira, the storm to come. The truth unraveled slowly, like a tapestry pulled loose by trembling hands. It began with whispers from traders who crossed borders under cover of darkness, tales of noble caravans making secret crossings into enemy lands. Then came letters, coded missives intercepted by one of Elira's companions, a former court scribe who recognized the seal of Lord Thurin, a high-ranking noble once thought loyal to her family. Piece by piece, the shadows coalesced into a chilling picture. Her assassination had not been an act of war, but a carefully orchestrated betrayal from within. Lord Kalen had not acted alone. He had woven a coalition of discontented nobles, each promised wealth, land, or power under his rule. Some had felt threatened by Elira's growing influence, others embittered by reforms she had championed in her father's court. Kalen had played them masterfully, feeding their ambitions while positioning himself as the only viable heir once she was removed. The explosion that destroyed her wing was no accident. It was engineered, designed to eliminate her without suspicion. And with her presumed dead, Kalen turned the kingdom's grief into fury, framing a neighboring realm as the culprits and rallying support for a war that served no purpose beyond consolidating his own control. The revelation struck Elira like a blade. Her cousin, someone she had once laughed with in the palace gardens, who had read poetry with her in the old library, had looked her in the eye and plotted her death. The pain was sharp, but the betrayal gave her clarity. Kalen's rule was built on a lie, and the war was costing innocent lives. But knowledge alone was not enough. To return to the capital and simply accuse him would be suicide without proof and allies. If she moved too soon, Kalen would tighten his grip, silence those who believed in her. She had to be deliberate, precise. To expose the truth, she would need to walk back into the heart of the kingdom that had mourned her, stronger, smarter, and ready to burn down the lies that had taken her place. Elira knew she couldn't take back the throne alone. Her return needed more than a name. It needed proof, strategy, and people who believed in something bigger than fear. Quietly, she began to gather those who had not forgotten her. Some found her by luck, others by whispered rumor, but each one came with their own scars, their own reasons for following a lost princess back into the lion's den. The first to join her was Sir Kalen of Westmere, a grizzled knight once sworn to her father's guard. Left for dead during the chaos of the explosion, he'd spent months hiding in the outer provinces, nursing wounds and watching Kalen's tyranny grow. Fiercely loyal and blunt, he became Elira's sword arm, her protector, and the first to kneel when she revealed the truth. Next came Mira, a young thief from the city slums with sharp eyes and quicker fingers. Raised on the streets under the boots of palace soldiers, Mira had no love for nobles, but when Elira saved her from a hanging for stealing food, she found a different kind of loyalty. Mira knew every tunnel, secret stair, and hidden passage in the capital. Her knowledge would be their map. Then there was Idrin, a spy once loyal to Kalen, now disillusioned by the regime he'd helped build. Calm, calculating, and haunted, Idrin brought with him the secrets of Kalen's court, documents, names, patterns. His betrayal was dangerous, but invaluable. Last was Saren, an exiled noble and former political rival of Elira's father. Cunning and bitter, Saren joined for his own reasons, but his mind for tactics and politics made him a powerful ally, one Elira watched closely but did not fully trust. Together, this unlikely band trained in shadows and plotted in whispers. Using disguises, stolen documents, and secret routes, they began infiltrating the capital piece by piece. They bribed guards, slipped messages to loyalists still hiding within palace walls, and mapped out Kalen's every move. What had begun as a fragile hope grew into a silent rebellion, each step bringing Elira closer to the throne room she had once called home, and the reckoning that waited within it. Draped in a tattered cloak and hood, Elira slipped through the gates of the city she had once called her own. No fanfare welcomed her, no banners bore her crest. The streets of the capital buzzed with the restless energy of a people ground down by fear and silence. Her eyes darted across the cracked stones and shuttered windows, each step weighted with grief and fury. Where once her image had adorned murals and tapestries, now only Lord Kalen's polished likeness remained, hung from balconies, stamped on coinage, etched into stone. Her name was absent from every scroll and statue. In the public square, she watched a herald speak of Kaelin's victory over chaos and the false legacy of the lost princess, painting her as weak, unfit, even treasonous. Her fists clenched beneath her cloak, but she held her silence. This was not the time. Word had spread of Kaelin's upcoming coronation, an elaborate ceremony in the palace throne room, with nobles, foreign dignitaries, and commoners in attendance. It was the perfect stage. In shadowed corners, her allies worked tirelessly to set the pieces. Witnesses were gathered, documents secured, escape routes prepared. Elira watched it all unfold with a quiet resolve. She would not sneak into history like a ghost. She would walk through the palace doors with fire in her eyes and truth on her tongue, and take back what was hers. The throne room shimmered with gold and crimson, its arched ceilings echoing with the sound of triumph. Musicians played a regal march as courtiers applauded, their smiles polished and rehearsed. Lord Kaelin stood at the center, draped in royal finery, his silver-stitched cloak flowing behind him like a shadow. With a confident sweep of his hand, he welcomed the assembled nobles, foreign dignitaries, and loyal subjects. Today was not only a celebration of peace and strength, it was, as he claimed, the final chapter in a turbulent era. His era. Speeches flowed like wine, each one carefully orchestrated to reinforce the image of a benevolent, victorious ruler. Kaelin spoke of order restored, of enemies vanquished, and of a kingdom reborn through sacrifice and courage. He praised the memory of his cousin, Princess Elira, calling her a symbol of innocence lost, her absence a tragic reminder of chaos. He bowed his head, pausing just long enough to draw murmurs of reverence and sorrow. Then, with practiced poise, he turned to ascend the throne. The great doors boomed open. A gust of wind swept through the room, snuffing out some of the ceremonial candles. Gasps rose like a tide as every head turned toward the entrance. Standing in the doorway, haloed by sunlight, was a woman in a traveler's cloak, her face unveiled, her eyes fierce and unflinching. Though thinner, battle-worn, and cloaked in dust, her presence was unmistakable. The very air shifted. "By the gods," someone whispered. "It's her." Kaelin's blood drained from his face. His fingers tightened on the throne's edge. Elira stepped forward, slow and deliberate, every inch of her body radiating the calm of someone who had walked through fire and come out steel. "You mourned me," she said, her voice rising across the silence, "but I did not die. I was betrayed." A ripple of shock ran through the room. She pulled a scroll from beneath her cloak, sealed letters, hidden records, the testimonies of those who had turned against Kaelin. She named the nobles who had plotted with him, pointed to foreign alliances forged in secret, to the war built on lies. Her words were not wild accusation, but truth laid bare, corroborated by documents, eyewitnesses, and survivors. "You turned my kingdom into a weapon," she said, her voice trembling with fury. "You used my name to wage your war. And now, I return not as a ghost, but as your reckoning." Guards hesitated. Nobles murmured. Some knelt. Some fled. But Elira stood tall, the throne behind Kaelin no longer unreachable, no longer out of sight. Kaelin's voice cracked through the stunned silence, a desperate blend of denial and fury. He called her an impostor, a witch, a rebel draped in lies. But with every accusation he flung, Elira answered with truth, signed confessions, forged documents bearing his seal, testimonies from once loyal allies who now stood beside her. The evidence was overwhelming, undeniable. The court that had once worshipped Kaelin began to turn against him, eyes widening as the full scope of his deception came into view. Some nobles scrambled to distance themselves, swearing ignorance, while others attempted to flee the palace only to be intercepted by loyalists Elira had placed at the gates. Arrests were made. Titles were stripped. The power Kaelin had so carefully constructed collapsed like ash in the wind. He was seized before the throne he'd tried to claim, his crown ripped from his brow not by a mob, but by justice. In the days that followed, Elira stood before her people, not as a triumphant monarch, but as a humbled survivor. She wore no crown, only a simple sash, and when she spoke, It was not from a dais but among the crowd. She vowed transparency, fairness, and to rebuild the kingdom not in her image, but in the image of its people. The throne, once a symbol of distance and power, would now be a place of service. Elira had returned, not just as a princess, but as a promise. The years passed, and with them, the wounds of the kingdom began to heal. Queen Elira stood upon the palace balcony, no longer a girl forged in silk, but a woman shaped by fire, steel, and sorrow. Below her, the city buzzed with new life, children laughing in the streets, merchants shouting cheerfully in open markets, artists painting her likeness not as a deity, but as a leader who listened. The kingdom had changed, and so had she. Her crown was simple now, lighter than the burdens she once carried. She ruled not from behind walls, but from within the world she had once barely known. Councils made up of farmers, tradesmen, scholars, and knights guided her rule. Laws were rewritten. The oppressed had a voice. War had been replaced by reconciliation, secrets by transparency. In the quiet of the evening, Elira sometimes walked the palace gardens alone. She would pause beneath the same tree where her mother once sang lullabies and reflect on the path that had brought her here, the night she almost died, the faces who helped her rise, the truths she had been forced to see. She had lost much, but she had found more. As dawn spilled gold across the horizon, she smiled. A new day had come, not just for her, but for all of Virelia.